Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us once again for our guided meditation and Dharma talk here at the Blue Lotus Meditation and Mindfulness Center here in Brainerd, Minnesota, which is in central Minnesota. Apologize for being a few minutes late this evening. Our beloved little dog downstairs, she needed to go outside and use the restroom, so I guess dogs don't use the restroom. She had to go outside and do her business. And so thank you for joining us and thank you for your patience as we're a few minutes late attending to some loving kindness and some taking care of our furry little friends for these few moments. I'm Vladimir, and thank you for joining us tonight. Today is February 17th, 2025. It is about 6:07 p.m. here in the Central Time Zone. And so just a few brief announcements before we begin tonight's Dharma talk is we have opened up and started our YouTube membership channels. So if you want to partake in seeing some behind the scenes and early release videos and whatnot, you're welcome to subscribe to that particular feature. Otherwise, patience is good too, and you'll see those videos, a little bit later. But we will upload to the membership platform, at least 2 or 3 times a month in that sense. And then also, don't forget, we have our copies of the Dhammapada that are for sale that you can purchase right off of our website, right under the Documents tab. And they're only like $6. And if you've read some memes out there that, they quote Buddha, very often those memes originate and those sayings originate from that text. And so it's nice that you'll be able to download that or look at those, look them up and find out the complete context of what those statements really are. And so that's beneficial as well. So before we begin, let's start off with the 3 jewels. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Very good. So tonight's topic is being content. Very often in our fast-paced world, a lot of distractions and so forth, that we're not content with where we are, especially when we find ourselves comparing where we are with where we perhaps think we should be, or perhaps where somebody else is. And that can be, hurtful to our own well-being at times. And so we'll explore those factors that contribute to that dissatisfaction, as well as how we can learn to being content with ourselves. So let's begin, though, with a guided meditation on being content. So go ahead and take a few moments and just get into your comfortable position while I update my camera slightly. And let's begin by taking a moment to just adjust your body, into your position. You may close your eyes or keep them slightly open with a soft focus, looking downward a few feet in front of you if you choose. Breathe in. Pause. And breathe out. And you're invited to allow a half smile to rest on your face as well. And lift your spine and allow your shoulders to soften. And soften your belly as you continue settling in. Breathe in. Pause. And breathe out. Go ahead and let your natural breathing cycle just resume. Don't force or don't control it. Just let it go naturally. And let's meditate on being content. Our world is fast-paced and as such may make us feel like we'll never catch up. And when we feel we're behind, this causes feelings of unworthiness and anxiety to surface. And we may not even feel safe and secure with where we are as a result. And when this happens, we are no longer happy with ourselves. We are no longer content. And when we are not content, we are not living in the present moment. And to bring us back into balance and nurture our contentment, it's necessary for us to remind ourselves of what we truly have. We practice patience with ourselves. We practice acceptance with ourselves. We practice compassion for ourselves. We practice empathy for ourselves. And we also bring our attention to the impermanence of all conditions. And we find that when we practice patience, acceptance, compassion, empathy, all with the understanding of impermanence, contentment naturally arises within. Go ahead and take a few moments, if you would, and just relax and open your eyes. Bring yourself back into the present moment. So we think about being content. We can think about why we are discontent or why are we unhappy. There's a lot of reasons why that could be. Right? Our world is very complex. There's a lot of complexities, a lot of variables, a lot of intricacies, both which some may be in our control and others, certainly not within our control. And certainly with some of these intricacies and situations and circumstances, we certainly need money to pay for essential living items, rent, car payment, car insurance, health insurance, whatever it is, just so we can survive. right? And sometimes when we feel that we are lacking in that, that brings about those feelings of unhappiness or discontentment. Additionally, there's just too many flashy objects out there, right? It's hard to keep up. And when we feel that it's necessary for us to keep up and we're not able to, that brings about feelings of, not being happy with ourselves, not being content with where we are. And so we can look at some of those attributes of why we are feeling this way. And some of them, again, are outside of our own control. And society is one of them. Right? We can't control what goes on in society. Society is very fast paced. And when I was thinking about how to approach this, maybe some of our, you may have heard the term rat race, right? We're in the rat race. And that's oftentimes, described as society trying to get ahead in life, trying to achieve more than what we have. And that can be very hard. But think about just the idea of a rat in a race. Sometimes he's in a maze, right? Put a rat in a maze, and the objective is tries to go find some cheese or some type of treat or reward at the end. And as that rat is running around, he's going all, through these little avenues and whatnot. And, roadblocks or dead ends, not necessarily roadblocks, but dead ends. And he has to backtrack and reroute, figure out something else. Finally, he gets his cheese. Eventually, after a while, he finds it. He gets his treat. But what happens again? He just gets put into another maze, right? So it's just trying to figure out, how we can be content. And so society kind of dictates or sets up conditions where, if we're not mindfully aware, we may not be content. And a lot of things are superficial too. Think about how fast things come and go. Styles, music, artists, books, different trends. And the idea of a trend, just in general, just means it's not long lasting. It's fleeting. Trying to keep up with a trend is very difficult because they are fleeting. Think about the dance crazes. When I was thinking about this, I thought of the hustle. Man, that's like from the 70s. I still can't do it. I gave up a long time ago. Just no rhythm. So superficialness, right? And styles, right? Every season there's a new style. But also what kind of contributes to this unhappiness or this discontentment is society being just, there's like a lack of cohesionness. A lot of times we find ourselves being isolated, even from our neighbors. If we live in an apartment complex, do you know your neighbors? Could you knock on their door if you were in trouble? Do they know your names? Even if it's not an apartment complex, maybe it's a house. Do you know your neighbors? Do they know you? So there's a lack of that community building, a lack of cohesiveness in that sense. And when we feel isolated, we feel alone. And when we feel alone, who do we turn to? And that can bring about feelings of discontent, not happy with where we are. And that also leads us to media, right? All forms of media, right? Movies, for one. How often have you watched a movie and like, man, that guy's a really flashy dresser, or wow, she's driving this, the latest sports car model, and so forth. And understanding how to separate fiction from reality. Right? We look at, famous, popular movies or television shows or whatnot, and we judge our lives like, wow, why can't I be that? And that's going to bring about a lot of discontent because we have to learn how to separate fiction from reality. That is a person, the director or whoever produced those movies, that's their vision. That's a character that they're portraying, on the big screen or little screen. It's not real life, even in documentaries sometimes. And in music, right? There's a lot of music out there. I like my music, don't get me wrong, but sometimes when we listen to them bragging, the artist bragging about, I've got all this money, flashy cars, big mansions and whatnot, there's some artistic license in that, right? And so understanding that we have to separate, again, art or fantasy in that sense, right? A scripted, right, dictation, right? It's designed to make us feel some kind of a way. And so if we're not aware that that's what is being portrayed, we can feel some discontent about ourselves because we think about, wow, man, why can't I have that too? I'm not saying that you can't try. We'll talk about goals later on as we come up. But, thinking about that, separating what we see versus our reality of where we are. And in the news, how often do you find a news segment that may take place far away from you and have zero to do with you? Has nothing to do with you. Like nothing ever. Like it would never come up in your life or influence you in any way. And you feel, man, wow, why did they do that? So understanding that, again, understanding that this is just being reported, right? You can do with it what you choose, but judging or having that dissatisfaction of something that occurs, maybe minor, maybe even major, far away, can make us feel some kind of way also. And that feeling could be unhappiness, unsatisfaction, or dissatisfaction, uncontentment. Again, those are variables well beyond our control. Right? So understanding that variables beyond our control, we have to take a step back. In magazines, I'm wondering if people still read magazines. Maybe get them delivered to your home. Certainly find them in the doctor's office. But, I remember reading and, waiting in the doctor's office and seeing all types of glamour magazines sometimes. And then even starting in the 90s and early 2000s, start finding or understanding that a lot of those portrayals of whoever is in, could even be GQ, right? That, again, that's portrayal, right? They're selling something, right? They're portraying some type of imagery that the artist, the editor, the magazine, the photographer, the author is portraying to you. And so when we try to judge ourselves by, wow, man, that's a really cool suit. Wish I had that suit. Or I really like those heels, right? And maybe on the expensive side. And again, it's a portrayal of not necessarily reality. Again, variables that we can control versus what we cannot control. And social media, right? Understanding that most of the imagery and the videos that you see on social media is somebody putting their best foot forward, right? Making themselves or whatever it is that they're trying to relate to you in the best positive image or spotlight as can be. Sometimes you find somebody really upset and being authentic, right? And that's good, right? Social media can have a very positive outlet, in that sense. But it's also one-sided. You may find somebody who's upset about something. You're only getting their perspective, and their perspective is valid. Let me say that again. Their perspective is valid, but sometimes we have to understand that there can be some misunderstandings in certain situations. And so oftentimes those imagery, especially, glamour shots, you're not seeing all the retakes or, the smudged makeup or the trip and falls as they walk down, the beach, as they get those beautiful sunsets. So again, social media can be one-sided and, usually on the positive or the glamorous side. Sometimes it's even shock value. Like, considering that when we see videos of people behaving or displaying poor behavior in public, that's shock value. How does that make us feel? Like, why are they acting this way? I would never act this way. We think about that to ourselves. And again, believe it or not, that can still elicit feelings of discontent within ourselves. because we, again, think about people who are behaving poorly, like, what's going on? Why are they behaving this way? So that can make us feel poorly about ourselves too, believe it or not. So understanding there can be some shock value in that, as well as likes. It seems like, the more thumbs up and the hearts you get, the more valid that message is, right? But remembering all messages are valid, right? They are, even the ones we don't like sometimes. And so we have to be non-judgmental about them, though, right? Because whoever's displaying or relating that message, they have a reason. Parents and relatives, right? So now we're bringing this a little bit closer to home, right? Parents and relatives are in some families can be a big source of discontent, right? Because they often have, as a parent myself, expectations for our own children, right? Sometimes parents don't realize, or they have forgotten, or they have been jaded or shaped by their own experiences of how a world should be. Or, I want you to be a doctor, a lawyer, right? Something high profile like that. But not realizing that, man, maybe you're happy just being you. Being you can make somebody very happy, finding that authentic self, right? And so sometimes trying to live up to parents' expectations can be very hard. It's not impossible sometimes. I'm sure my father and wanted me to do something differently, but here I am. I did something differently before, but a little bit different now where we are. And with parents and aunts and uncles also comes a generation gap, right? Usually younger generations are oftentimes much more progressive and forward thinking, and sometimes older generations are not, stuck in their ways. Get off my lawn, kid, right? Things along those lines. So realizing that there's going to be, with the generation gap, there's going to be some language barriers, slang and so forth, that may not translate to what somebody else is thinking or how they express themselves. And as time goes by, society changes, right? Your parents may still be thinking or behaving like it was 40 years ago. I find myself that way sometimes. But then I have to take a step back and realize how I was thinking 40 years ago. My parents were thinking 40 years earlier before them. So that was 80 years now at that point. I don't think they're that old. But anyway, society changes. Norms change. And oftentimes for the better, right? And it's usually when we find somebody who is resistant to progressive, to more open, more forward thinking, more inclusive ideas, there can be some friction, right? Some disconnect, some discontentment on both areas. One of the biggest factors, though, in being content is just you. It is how someone thinks about themselves. We can remove what society dictates. We can remove what media or social media or even parents relate to us. And although they can be a great influence, ourselves is the biggest barrier sometimes to feeling contentment. And that's because oftentimes we have a lack of true connection with ourselves and sometimes others, but having a lack of connection with ourselves. And with that lack of connection comes a lack of realization or awareness of ourselves. And as a result, sometimes we can feel unworthy about our decisions and actions. Maybe something good does happen to you, but without the awareness of yourself, I feel unworthy. I feel like an imposter as I go out there and, perform this new role. And as a result of unworthiness, judgment comes in. and not usually good judgmental behaviors, right, or thoughts, but more on the negative side, more on the condescending, judgmental side. And that can happen when we don't have that awareness for ourselves, right, or that connection with ourselves. And that also goes to expectations for ourselves. Sometimes we just hold ourselves up too high of a standard. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have proper demeanor, proper speech, right? Kind speech to someone, uplifting and supportive, or good morals, right? Good behavior in that sense. But expectations in the sense that I'm going to finish my college degree by the time I'm 22, and by the time I'm 26, I'm going to be a VP, a vice president of something. Maybe kind of hard unless you start your own company or work with somebody else. So sometimes when we hold ourselves to too high of a bar and we don't meet those expectations, what does that bring? Judgment, negative judgment to ourselves. Maybe there are outside influences, outside factors that influence that you didn't get a promotion or you didn't achieve some type of goal. And with that judgment, unworthiness. Oh, I'm unworthy to be, in this position of where I am. So having too firm of expectations, and we'll talk about this in a few more moments, a little bit more in depthly, but sometimes having those too firm expectations can really bring about not having contentment within ourselves. Oftentimes too, though, it's just a lack of focus. So think about society, how busy we are, how all these different lanes and avenues that we are running on and trying to accomplish. Working on too many things at once will bring us a lack of focus. So working on too many projects, whether it's at work or at home, a combination of both, social life or whatever it is, events with the kids, whatever it is, right? Too many activities at once, too many things that we are working on brings about a lack of focus. With a lack of focus, we may not achieve one or all of them. When we don't achieve that particular goal, we become judgmental about ourselves. When we are judgmental about ourselves, harshly, right, feelings of unworthiness come about, bringing about more stress and anxiety. So, thinking about some of those topics, right? Now, how can we use those topics or those bullet points or those highlights that I kind of just mentioned to learn to be content with where we are, right? And simply practicing acceptance, just like in the guided meditation, practicing acceptance. Now, acceptance does not mean complacency. It just means this event happened. There's nothing you can do about it. Either way, we can learn to accept it. And from there, we can grow, maybe perhaps change our strategies, change our behaviors, change our our mindsets. Those are variables that we can control. And realizing that whatever that situation was, it's impermanent. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, all situations, all conditions are impermanent. And so we can take that for what it's worth, but it's kind of a nice thing, right? Knowing that not everything is going to be static or stagnant, because that's what happens after a while, right? When something's not moving or changing, it becomes stagnant, like pond water sometimes, swampy water. And when we practice acceptance, that also helps us learn to nurture our own non-judgmentalness, right? Because we realize sometimes we can do our best. Things aren't just going to manage to fall into our lap in that sense. Just because we work hard all the time doesn't mean we're going to get the reward that we are after. I'll give you a little hint that the hard work is the reward. So when we think about that, that's changing our perspective. Right? Sometimes that's hard to hear. Sometimes it's hard to face, even for me at times. Right? Sometimes the hard work is just the reward itself. And when we learn to be non-judgmental about ourselves, we'll also learn to be not being too hard on ourselves. Again, there are so many variables that can happen in life, in any given situation. Some you have influence over, most you don't. But when we are too hard on ourselves and we become judgmental, that's when those feelings of unworthiness begin to manifest again, right? They begin to dominate and plant that little seed in your mind, and we feel unworthy and, uncontent or discontent with where we are. And reflecting upon what we have and not what we don't have. It's an important thing, right? You all have, if you're watching this video now or sometime in the future, you're living, you're alive, you're breathing, you're thinking, you're caring, you're empathetic, you're compassionate. You're wanting to improve yourself. You're wanting to nurture your own well-being. That is what you have. It's not always material things. If you have a place to stay that's warm and dry, that's wonderful. You have a lot more than a lot of other people. If you have clean water to drink and a couple meals a day, that's perfect. You have a lot more than a lot of other people. Somebody is always wanting to be where you are because there's somebody that's always less fortunate than you have. And then when it comes time to completing an action, whether it comes true or not, ask yourself, did you do your best? If the answer is yes, then that's all that matters. You did your best. Again, not everything is going to just fall into your lap in that sense, right? Not all of your hard work is going to, come to the desired result. So if you have done your best, that's all you need to do. If you didn't do your best, it's a different conversation. Maybe we'll have to talk about that later. But if you didn't do your best, think about why you didn't. Were you a little bit arrogant, thinking about, I don't have to put forth too much effort. I've got this in the bag. Right? That could be a little bit on the egocentric side. So maybe that's why you didn't do your best. But with all this, can you still have goals? Right? Because we talk about being content and acceptance and finding the joy with where we are. Right? Can you still have goals? Absolutely. Right? But understanding that allowing for your goals to be fluid. If you say that I want to lose 20 pounds by the end of February and you only have 11 days left, it's probably not going to come true. Your goal would not be met. It's a lot of weight, a lot of mass in 11 days, 20 pounds. How would you feel? Probably not too good. But if you allowed yourself, I'm going to give myself 5 weeks, right? Have some fluidity in it, right? And even if it took 6 weeks, okay, so what? Still lost the weight. That's a good thing, right? I keep telling myself that too. That's why I brought that up. So, but having goals, right? But allowing them to be fluid, right? Allowing that grace, allowing patience for them to come to fruition. As long as you're doing your best, making an effort, right action, right? One of the 8 noble truths, or the one of the steps on the Noble Eightfold Path, right? Right action, right mindset, right contemplation, so forth. So allowing them to be fluid. So something to think about as we think about how we can be more content with where we are. instead of always chasing the shiny object, looking around where we are. Because when we are not content, we're not in the present moment. And when we're not in the present moment, feelings of anxiety can surface. All right. Well, our next talk is March 3rd at 6 p.m. Again, that's a Monday evening from 6 to 6:30 or so. And it's going to be titled Straightening Your Robe. Right? Sometimes things happen in our lives that maybe make us a little bit disheveled. Right? A little, maybe the shirt gets untucked. Right? Maybe we're feeling a little rough around the edges. So straightening your robe on March 3rd, 6 p.m. And with that, my friends, please feel free to reach out to us with any comments. Love reading your comments. Love responding to them. Feel free to shoot us an email or send us an email with any questions or any support that you may need. We're always happy to help. And we have so many free offerings and guided meditations and free individual one-on-one support, as well as group support as well in our weekly sanghas. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or need any support in any way. And with that, my friends, thank you for coming, and we wish you all many blessings on your mindfulness journey.